Welcome to this interview with the Foreign Minister of Mexico, Luis Videgaray.
Delighted. Thank you.
2 years ago, the Paris Climate Agreement was signed here. Many people are now afraid that the agreement is in danger because the United States has withdrawn and also because there's a funding deficit.
Mexico is deeply committed to the Paris Agreement for fighting against climate change. We were one of the first countries to propose objectives for reducing carbon. We even have a law on climate change, and Mexico, through its president, is participating in the One Planet Summit launched by President Macron in order to solve the practical problems of implementing this agreement, including its financing. President Peña will be submitting with other governments concrete initiatives to solve the problems of implementation, how to achieve a roadmap which will involve the financing, but also measures to encourage reductions of emissions of carbon and to build resilience, and particularly in the Caribbean area.
The fact that the United States no longer wishes to participate in this agreement, is this a major problem for you? How can it be solved?
It's a decision that we regret, but it doesn't affect Mexico's decision. It is clear on the part of all the other countries as well, including all the other governments of the states, of cities in the United States. We are presenting an initiative to determine the price of carbon and build a carbon market on the American continent with the governments of Mexico, Canada, Colombia, Peru, Chile, the state of Washington, the state of California. That is to say, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the other states are not interested in this effort. Of course, we regret the decision of the President of the United States, but the world must continue to move forward in the direction which is to mitigate the impact of climate change.
And one of the aspects is the question of the $100 billion to be paid every year by rich countries to the less developed countries. But it seems that this is not happening, and this is a major problem as regards implementation of the agreement.
It's one of the problems for which the summit has been held, and the political will of everybody is to solve the problem. We need to be creative and to have willpower. We need financial instruments, sustainable instruments. For this reason, we are working. We knew already 2 years ago that it was a major challenge, not a surprise, and consequently we must continue to work in the right direction. And many initiatives in Paris will make it possible to rise to the challenge.
The relationship with the United States since the election of Donald Trump are more difficult than they were before. He said once again that he wants to build a wall. How is it possible to improve the relationship?
We are at a stage where we are defining decisions that will be taken in the next weeks or months with the United States. We will have to define how the two nations can coexist in the next decades. At the moment, perhaps the most important decision has to do with our trade relationship, with our free trade agreement with North America and Canada. We are negotiating this. It's a negotiation process with all the features of an important agreement, a very complex agreement technically, and we don't necessarily have the same viewpoints, but it's a process which is underway and which has great potential for achieving positive results for the three countries. It will depend on the negotiators. We have a roadmap, a timetable up till the end of March, and we must be prepared for different scenarios. But without any doubt, it is possible to arrive at a good agreement. Mexico is working in good faith, in a constructive way, and we have a very good negotiating team. The three countries would not be participating in this process if they didn't wish to have a better free trade agreement. The wall is a decision made by the United States. Mexico doesn't participate in this dialogue. Mexico is a sovereign country which has the right to determine how to protect its borders in the same way as Mexico, France, or any other country in the world. What I can assert categorically is that we are not involved in this dialogue. We never negotiate with the United States to talk about a wall. Obviously, Mexico will not contribute in any way to the financing of the wall between our two countries. The wall already exists, 1,000 kilometers. It's not a very friendly gesture, and perhaps it's an idea which may not work, given the aim of the United States, but it's not a decision that we can take. It is not part of our conversation with the United States.
What is part of the conversation is the policy on migration of the United States. There are a lot of Mexicans who are resident in the United States and who remit funds back to Mexico. Are you afraid that the decisions of the Trump administration might change this situation?
The figures are self-evident. Since the arrival of President Trump in power, there's been a reduction of 30% in the number of expulsions. President Obama had expelled 2.8 million people to Mexico, a very high figure historically. And the Trump government is continuing to reduce the number of expulsions. In the Mexican community in the United States, there are fears of anguish given the rhetoric and the discriminatory language that exists in the U.S.
Or racist?
But today, the figures show a reduction, not an increase in expulsions.
So, if I understand correctly, you say you shouldn't listen to what the president says. We should look at what the administration's doing. Is that correct?
What we have observed, there is a reduction, not an increase in expulsions. We have no knowledge of massive expulsions or changes of migratory policy.
I'd now like to talk about Venezuela. There's still a lot of tension between the government and the opposition. And there is a process of mediation going on. You participated in a meeting, and there have been municipal elections, and now President Maduro has said that the opposition parties who didn't participate in the municipal elections will not be able to take part in the presidential elections. What is your view on this?
I think it's an unfortunate statement by President Maduro. What I saw in Santo Domingo, we are summoned to a meeting on December the 15th in Santo Domingo, the will of both parties to arrive at an agreement in order to restore normalcy, democratic normalcy, limiting or reducing probably in an arbitrary way the participation of the political parties, and notably of the opposition in an election process, is not the right way to be followed. We will be meeting in Santo Domingo to continue this participation, this diplomatic participation of Mexico to facilitate and support the negotiation process, which is the responsibility of the Venezuela. What is important is to restore the democratic order in Venezuela, and it has been very adversely affected.
Are you afraid that now he's won several elections, that the power would like to organize elections they can't lose?
The results of the election don't surprise anybody. In these elections, the opposition participated very marginally. The result was expected. What is important is that both parties, President Maduro's party and the opposition, should generate the right conditions, authentic conditions, to arrive at an agreement. It would seem that the statements we've heard until now do not go in that direction. Mexico will participate in Santo Domingo very shortly. We will work in good faith to generate the right condition, but it will depend on Venezuela, if the political will exist, to arrive at an agreement that will make it possible to continue to restore the democratic order.
About agreements, there are also negotiations currently underway between the European Union and Mexico. Are we close to a trade deal? between these two entities?
Yes, we're very close. It's a process which began about 4 years ago. We have already completed many chapters. The aim is to broaden access to the market, European products in Mexico and Mexican products in Europe, to facilitate investment, facilitate trading. And it's an important agreement. Europe is an important market for Mexico, and Mexico is also a very good market for Europe. So we hope that in the next weeks we will have good news, and this agreement will be submitted to the public as something, without any doubt, will not only open up new markets, but will send a clear message of support to free trade at a time when there are so many negative speeches about free trade.
Will this be before the end of the year or afterwards?
Probably in the next few weeks, at the beginning of next year, when we publicly announce the result. But I can already tell you that we've made a lot of progress. The negotiations are heading in the right direction and with good results.
More than 3 years ago, 43 students died in Mexico in an affair that's not yet been clarified. The international community has the impression that the government is not doing everything it can to shed light on this. Could you tell us that the truth will be known one day?
The investigations are underway in line with law and the Inter-American Commission on the Rights of Man. It's a very complex, painful investigation, but the process is on the move, and it will continue in line with standards, with the best investigation techniques in a public and open way.
Thank you, Luis Videgaray. Thank you for talking to France 24. Thank you.